The Edmonton Elks are 0-5 for the first time to start a season since 1965. This team is awful, and we're going to be talking about that in this video. So before we do that, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or the channel. That being said, let's get into it. So yes, the Edmonton squad is coming off of a heartbreaking loss to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, off to their worst start, really since the mid-60s. And very well, this kind of shows what is going wrong with the team or how bad it is by highlighting the fact that we haven't seen this since basically the infancy of the CFL. The CFL began in 1958. The last time that the Elks were this bad were back in the mid-60s, and of course this is a problem. So let's take a look at some of the things that are holding this team back in terms of winning games. So the first thing is the fact that they can't run the ball. They are dead last in the league for yards per carry. They're averaging 4.22 yards per carry, meaning that effectively when they are on average getting the ball and running it, they are probably facing a situation where they're, say, 2nd and 6, whatever the case may be. Not exactly ideal in a two-down league. And they're also tied for the league's fewest rushing touchdowns with 1 on the year. The only other team with 1 rushing touchdown through this point of the season is the Ottawa Redblacks, which becomes an even bigger issue when you realize the fact that Ottawa's played 2 less games than Edmonton, and that is a problem. Another thing is the fact that the passing game is not exactly what you'd like. Through 5 games, they have 5 passing touchdowns to 7 interceptions on the year. Ironically, that's not that bad when you took a look at quarterback rate, because teams like Ottawa, Hamilton, and Calgary have had some really bad points. Ottawa, that's kind of self-explained. Arbuckle and Adams were guys that they had to throw out there instead of Mazzoli. Now, Adams, of course, I don't think was a big part of that. I think it was more Arbuckle on how the season started. Hamilton had to throw the ball out because they've been behind in games, so that kind of explains where that happens there. But if it wasn't for some really bad starts for some other teams, Edmonton's quarterback situation probably would put them towards the bottom end of the league. They've also allowed a lot of sacks, the most in the league through this point. 16 sacks allowed through 5 games, and their offense is averaging the fewest points per game in the league at 12.4 points per game. In the CFL, that is simply not going to win you games consistently, as this club struggled to move the ball and really get points when it matters most. Then on defense, they have just really had a hard time stopping the run. That's been something that we've seen throughout the point of the season. They've allowed 42 first downs via the run and have the league's highest yards per carry against in the CFL, of course, averaging 5.6 yards per carry for opposing teams, meaning that the other teams are getting about 1.5 yards more per carry than Edmonton is. So let's say that they run the ball on first down on average, the other team is going to be set up in a 2nd and 4. Is it always like that? No, maybe they stop them at the line of scrimmage. Maybe the other team runs for 40 yards. But the situation does remain that every single game except this most recent game against the Saskatchewan Roughriders, they've allowed over 100 yards. Other teams gashed them a couple weeks ago. They played Toronto. AJ Olette right up the middle, no trouble. Chad Kelly untouched, virtually untouched for the 2-point conversion. And this team really just struggles to stop the run, which is a big issue. I know some people will say, oh, it's in the second half when the lead's kind of bigger and they are, maybe worried about stopping big plays. Whatever you want to argue, whatever the case is, the reality is they've been getting gashed by the run at points this season. Through the first 5 games, they are probably the worst team at stopping the run. That's going to be a problem, especially when other teams realize that they can just run it up the gut, no trouble. What are some other talking points for this team? Well, you look at the fact that Chris Jones simply will not play Trey Ford. Trey Ford is, of course, a Canadian quarterback they took in the first round of the draft. And recently, they just do not seem to want to give him any playing time. Chris Jones went on air to kind of talk about why he likes Ford, but Ford just doesn't fit into what they're trying to do, whatever the case is. Who drafted him? That's my question. And then, of course, my next question is, if he is a guy that you don't feel like you want to give him playing time through the 5 games of the season. Now, of course, he's been injured for 1. My question then becomes, why won't you trade him? Why won't you let him go if you're not going to play him? I think through the first 5 games of the year, he's played in 3 games, and he is not going to attempt a single pass. He's a first-round pick, and is a guy that a lot of people feel like has a future in the league, and whether that's as a starter or a backup, we don't know, because we simply aren't getting to see him play enough. The next question is, should Stephen McAdoo still be the offensive coordinator? Now, McAdoo is a guy that has plenty of experience as an offensive coordinator in the league. He has been the OC for Edmonton before, back in the mid-2010s. Also was for the Roughriders towards the back end of the 2010s. Took over this year for Saskatchewan, or Edmonton, actually it was last year, and things just don't look great. I mean, when you're averaging the fewest points per game, you're allowing the most sacks, you're not running the ball effectively, you're probably punting more than basically the rest of the league, except for maybe teams like Ottawa or Hamilton. it's a problem. And it does make you wonder at this point, if you have an experienced guy like that, why is the offense struggling to produce? What is going wrong here, and what could be done to change it? Would it be that he is replaced? What it would have to change? I don't know. Would the offensive scheme have to change? I can't tell you. We don't get as much film as the offensive staff does, or just the coaching staffs in general. But I can say one thing right now, through 5 games, this offense has not impressed. So when you are looking at that, you have to wonder, where does it happen? Probably from the top down. So should he be replaced? That's for them to decide. The next thing is, should Chris Jones be fired? Now, this one's going to be a little bit more controversial, because a lot of people will say, oh, Chris Jones has been a guy that's been able to turn teams around, over the course of his career and get them to be contenders. My argument here is, we're in year 2 with Edmonton. I feel like we're taking steps backwards if you're watching them as a CFL fan. Last year, they seemed to have a lot more heart compared to the 2021 team. 2023 team feels a lot like that 2021 team, where they were just, not competitive. They felt like they looked defeated out there on the field, and when they got beat, you just knew it, and it felt like the game was over. 2022 team, even if they got knocked in the mouth, seemed like they had no trouble trying to be competitive, as my dog lets out a big sigh. But yeah, I kind of look at this right now, and I feel like this 2023 team is nowhere near the team that was 2022, that had less talent on paper, but felt more competitive. So will that mean Chris Jones gets fired? I'm going to say probably not. Jones is a guy that they brought in to save money. He is the GM as well as the head coach, and also is a guy that, again, has been attributed to turnarounds of teams that maybe aren't in the best shape. And I just got to say right now, if you're 0-5 in year 2, when's the turnaround going to happen? Is it going to be right now? Is it going to be in year 3? I don't know. I don't think he'll get fired through this season unless they continue to lose a bunch of games and not pick up a few wins here or there. But it does remain to be seen. Is Jones going to be there in year 3? If he is it because they need to save money? The final talking point is about their upcoming schedule. Edmonton has 4 games that are, kind of upcoming, and really only one of them feels winnable. That is their first game out of the 4 being against the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Hamilton is looking to pick up their first win of the season as well, and that is a game that feels like a must-win for both sides, especially when it comes to the playoff hunt. In the East, it feels like Hamilton probably needs to win this more. I hate to say it, but it already feels like Edmonton's season is done and over with. But yeah, after that, they play Winnipeg, they play BC, and then they play Winnipeg again. We could very realistically see, if Edmonton doesn't pick up this first win against the Tiger Cats, the fact that they could start the year 0-9, which I'm not an expert, but I have a feeling that might be the first time in the CFL era that Edmonton would start off the year so poorly. It does remain to be seen. Could this be one of the worst teams, not only in Edmonton franchise history, but in CFL history? I don't think they'll be as bad as that team in the early 2000s that the Hamilton Tiger Cats had that went 1-17. But the reality is, this team is pretty bad. So in closing, I don't really have a whole lot to say. Again, this is a fan base that I feel like has really been thrown under the bus just with how this team has performed over the years. This was a club that for decades was either going to Grey Cups, winning Grey Cups, or just consistently making the playoffs for a very long time. The crowd was great, the atmosphere was great, and this was a franchise that felt really proud. This is a franchise at this point now that feels like it's basically just been drugged through the mud and is everybody's whipping boy, if you will. And at this point, you kind of wonder where Edmonton's headed as a franchise. It gets harder and harder to get fans into the stadium because they just are bad. This is a team that is playing historically bad, and for a city of Edmonton that feels like, they deserve a better product, when the product continually seems to get worse and worse and your expectations get lower and lower, it's hard to market this team and to say that, oh, we have to be here. As of right now, I think that they are in a spot where they could definitely get a couple wins through the remainder of the season, but again, this really looks like a season that's already done, and it's not even halfway through the year. But what are your thoughts on this Edmonton team? Is this team going to be historically bad? How does this team get better? Should Chris Jones get fired? Should Trey Ford start? Should McAdoo get relieved of his duties? All that stuff, let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe and have a great night.